Hello all, I'm Eli from landlordgurus.com. Today I am talking with Kevin Donovan. He's a managing broker with Windermere Real Estate here in Seattle, Washington. And today we're going to talk about his experience in helping buyers find great rental properties. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Eli, and thanks for having me. How are you doing?
Doing fine, thanks.
Great. So just to give you a little background on myself, I've been selling real estate for Windermere Real Estate since 1993. As of now, that puts me at about 27 years experience. In fact, I think I've helped you and your wife find a house, and I think I've helped you find a rental property. So the good news is we've worked together, so you know how I do things.
Yeah, for several years now. You've successfully guided us to find great properties, both our single family home and a rental here in our neighborhood. So I'm wondering, just to start off, how you start, when somebody like me, for example, comes to you saying they want to find a residential investment property. What questions do you ask them before you guys get started?
Eli, that's a really good question. And typically I do have a lot of questions when somebody's looking for a rental income type property. The first thing I like to ask is if they own any rental properties. So I'd like to know what their experience level is. Secondly, where are they now? And the reason I ask that is it's much easier to manage a property that is close to where you currently live. Now, if you are going to have somebody else manage it for you, then that question really doesn't matter as much. And so then that, again, we look at that. And then we also look at if you happen to own other rental properties, do you want to continue to purchase properties near the one you already own for ease of management, or do you want to diversify? And there might be multiple reasons to diversify. For example, with Seattle regulations, maybe you'd like to diversify outside of Seattle and avoid those regulations and move on from there. Do you want to be in Western Washington, Eastern Washington? What's your tolerance for going up and down the road, up and down I-5? And so those are just some of the questions I ask, and then we take it from there.
Yeah, in fact, you and I and my wife just recently had a conversation about Seattle versus neighboring communities for some of these regulatory reasons. So, all
Absolutely.
great questions. A rental property, really needs to suit the character of the investor and what those investment goals are, including obviously making money. So let's talk about location a bit. It seems in Seattle that the boundaries of the city are expanding. People see neighborhoods farther and farther out from the center, as being viable, to work in Seattle. How do you talk to buyers about how to find value? For example, purchase price versus rental rates, and upside potential and that type of thing.
Well, what's interesting about Seattle that makes it very unique is the cap rates that are offered in Seattle are actually fairly low compared to other parts of the country. And the reason the cap rates are so low is we have the opposite, which is we have appreciation here at almost record rates, almost some of the best appreciation in the United States. So that offsets your cash flow, obviously. So a lot of people are willing to tolerate lower cap rates to get that appreciation. And that's just the Seattle market. Now, regarding at this very moment in history, there's a migration. And so the migration is leaving the dense, condos of downtown apartments and moving to single family houses that are a little bit farther afield. Commute times are down right now just because of what's going on. I don't know if this trend's going to, reverse as soon as, the current situation in the United States or in the world is fixed. But absolutely, the boundaries of Seattle are expanding, and people are looking for rentals. North Seattle, South Seattle, farther afield, even across the county line up into Snohomish County, for example. So, most people looking for a rental property, they'll look from here to Bellevue to even farther afield. And I think it just matters, what does that particular unit offer? Do you get the return that you want, and what is appreciation going to look like, or what is it predicted to be?
Yeah, that's a lot to consider, both for you guiding people as well as for the investors themselves. Do buyers usually come to you knowing what they want, either in terms of the characteristics of the property, or even whether or not it's single family, small, multifamily, or apartment buildings? What factors go into that? And I guess I'm also curious how often you end up guiding people which type of property to look at.
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, Eli, by the time most people contact me, they do have kind of an idea of what they want to do, whether that be they want to buy just a house and rent that out, or if they're looking for a duplex, triplex, fourplex, anything larger, financing is going to change. And so definitely if you're going larger than a fourplex, typically that's somebody who has some experience, owning income properties. And however, if somebody would come to me and they don't know what they're looking for, then we can just, look at what are their goals, how much capital do they have, how much leverage do they want, and what kind of return are they looking at? And, how long do they plan on owning the property? I mean, if you're really looking down the road, you're watching some of these companies, they're moving from Seattle to the east side and vice versa. There are some companies moving from the east side to Seattle. For example, Expedia is moving from Bellevue to Seattle. However, Amazon tends to right now is moving more towards Bellevue. So you have to look at all these factors on try to plan on where is the future going to be, and that's typically where you want to buy.
Yeah. In fact, we've went through this together fairly recently, as we mentioned before, and we selected a very nice single family home because there were a number of factors. That this is for family, so we might want to have family members live there at one point. So anyway, an example of kind of the objectives that one takes into consideration.
Yeah, in fact, Eli, that's the perfect example, which I didn't touch upon, which is sometimes you'll be purchasing a property for income now, however, planning eventually one day to move into it. And that's actually a great strategy because you can use a 1031 exchange to move in or purchase a property now tax-free, but eventually there's nothing that would keep you down the road from actually moving into that property. So obviously talk to your CPA before you do something like that, but I think typically people can do that and it's not an issue.
And sometimes people will go and buy the investment property, then move into it for a required amount of time, and then be able to move out of it and sell it under different tax structures. So again, that's a question for CPA, but
absolutely. And that's the other, that's the 2 of the last 5 years rule, and you can avoid some taxes doing that as well.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about choosing properties a bit. What are a few characteristics that you suggest that buyers look for when they choose an investment property?
Well, to start with, this region has typically been a seller's market. And so very often it's not about what you're looking for, but it's what's available. So first of all, you look at what's available. And then what you want to look at is obviously the price. And, is the price, going to get you the returns that you're looking for? So then you look at that neighborhood. But some of the things you want to look at, obviously, are location. Does the property, what's the maintenance look like on that property? What do rents look like in that area? And what is this property going to cost to own? And, I'm talking about future maintenance. Obviously a brand new building, which, we see a lot of these townhomes around here called 0 lot line townhomes. They're brand new. Yeah. You can rent them out. And for somebody who wants 0 maintenance costs over the next, 5 to 10 years, typically that's the way to go. Now, if you want to go a little farther out, buy an older home built in the 50s, has it been remodeled already? Does it have the quartz countertops? Does it have the engineered hardwood floors? Things like that. And so those are other things to look at. And in fact, you can look at both at the same time. Why not? And then just figure out which direction you want to go from there.
Yep. You touched a little bit on this, I think, but are there property characteristics that you advise clients to really stay away from? you know, things where you've seen some pitfalls maybe.
Absolutely. So once a house is of a certain age, built in the 20s, 30s, you really want to look at that sewer, the foundation, things like that, the roof. So obviously, we can talk about that, a little bit later about the purchase process. However, other things you want to stay away from are the super busy arterials with no parking, because eventually what you get is you get a high turnover on tenants, because tenants they'll tolerate a busy street more so than a homeowner who actually lives there. However, after a year or so, when their lease is up, they'll start looking around. And so homes that have issues such as no parking, busy streets, other things, or a high crime rate, you're going to get higher turnover. So you're always going to be looking for new tenants. And it's much, much more cost effective to keep a tenant there 2 to 3 years. The cost right there, will save you, 10% a year, keeping that tenant in there. So absolutely. There are definitely certain properties that if you wouldn't want to live there yourself, maybe you shouldn't buy it as a rental.
That's a good point. Yeah. There are, vacancy is expensive. So anything you can do to keep your vacancy rate down is a win. But,
absolutely.
So again, I think you touched on some of this, but what about the buildings themselves? Some characteristics or features where you advise caution, like the building itself maybe is going to be a little bit more problematic.
Well, you get the flat roof situation with some homes, and typically you got to be careful with that. Definitely get a roof inspector to look at that material. It's hard to tell if that's going to go bad or not. So it's nice to know when it was installed.
Yeah.
There back in the 90s, there was a product called LP siding, and that stuff is not great for the Northwest. It may have been fine in drier climates, but up here it just didn't work out well. And also stucco. Especially synthetic stucco is not a great product. Anytime I see that, that's a danger, because very often that just gets too wet and you get mold behind the product, and that ruins the underlying framing. So typically I like to see buildings that are either natural wood and well upkept. Typically metal roofs are better than non-metal roofs, or a new roof is great. If you have an older roof that's going, then that's a big expense coming up. One of my favorite products here in the Northwest is Hardy Plank, which is a cement backed board.
Yep.
And it comes in many forms, and that stuff is perfect for the Northwest. It really holds its paint really sticks to it.
Yep.
And it's impervious to water. So if I see a home that's been redone with Hardy Plank, or a new construction with Hardy Plank, then typically that type of siding is the perfect siding for the Northwest here. It's going to be very low maintenance.
Yeah, I've used lots of it. It is a good product, and keeping maintenance down is a great thing. Just maybe quickly touch on what type of features or amenities you have seen that renters really respond to. What if you're talking to a buyer, what do you suggest that they look for in a rental that you think will really be appealing to tenants?
So that's a great question. And so renters, they love a nice kitchen. They love quartz countertops, and they hate tile. They hate grout, because they're going to have to clean it. And it's also fairly outdated these days. So if you can get a slab countertop of some sort, that's great. Also, the less carpet, the better. If you can get hardwood floors, or if you can get these great new products, these engineered wood floors, they're perfect, because not only do renters like them, they can put in their own throw rugs or whatever they want to do. It's just, you're not going to trap smells. You're not going to it's not going to stain. Maybe, certain floors will get these light scratches in them that you got to keep an eye on. But typically, yeah, hardwood floors, decent quartz countertops or slab countertops in the bathrooms and the kitchens, and neutral paints, things like that. And those are typically the things that renters want, and also it makes it easier as a landlord, to take care of that stuff.
Actually, cleaning, I found, is easier for everybody involved, and it's one of the reasons I think that tenants like it is they don't They don't look at grout and think that that's somebody else's embedded grime in there. So, yeah.
True.
All right. So this last question's a bit tricky, I think. I'm wondering what you think about who is most likely to succeed as a rental property owner. You know, do they have a lot of time on their hands, a lot of capital or disposable income, you know, the ability to do repairs for themselves, you know, what, maybe just a success story that, you know, or one or two success stories that you've seen with the investors you've helped.
Well, so that's an interesting question. And I think the best way to answer this question is talk about somebody who's never purchased a rental property and then finally purchases one. So obviously, I think the ideal landlords are people that are resourceful. And what I mean by that is either they can do it themselves, but even if they don't have the time, they know who to call. And what I mean by that is you don't just look in the phone book and find, you know, the most expensive plumber out there. You actually have, you know, a plumber that's reliable, that knows you, doesn't work for you. And so typically I think, you know, a landlord has to be resourceful because you got to plan for the, you know, plumbing emergency at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning when, you know, you have to plan on, you know, the refrigerators are often go out, you know, those are a big issue. And then, you know, you got to plan for the washer and dryer, depending on if you're providing the washer and dryer or not, you know, things like that. So I think a landlord, a good landlord, you know, has a plan to just to take care of the tenant. And also, I think a good landlord also has to be fairly accepting of things that come along. So maybe a type A is not the ideal landlord, but if you're type A, you can still do it. You just have to, you know, have the right people in place.
Right. Yeah. Many different formulas, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Kevin. We really appreciate your time and your expertise. You know, we'll put this video up and a transcript on landlordgurus.com. And Kevin, I think you're going to be sharing this on your Vimeo account as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I do have a Vimeo account that I'll put on my website. So
okay, very good. Thanks everybody for following along, and look for the links below to some relevant articles, you know, which hopefully will be helpful. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thanks, Eli.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Take care.